Let's Talk Native is produced at the LTN Studios on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. We break all the rules for Native media by peeling back the layers of assimilation and indoctrination. No prayers, no buffalo speeches, and no spirituality shows. While this podcast does not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do take a tough look at history, oppression, and our survival. We highlight the voices of Native activists, writers, poets, artists, thinkers, and musicians who are fighting for the rights of Indigenous people all over Turtle Island. We may step on a few toes through our examination of culture, art, politics, history, and identity. But the real goal here is to bring our people together by breaking down what separates us. In this moment of historical change and social justice, our voices matter now more than ever before. So, welcome to Let's Talk Native with John Kane.
Say hello and welcome to the show. I am John Kane and this is Let's Talk Native. Today's going to be a show of me ranting a little bit here. Look, I'm watching so much play out in U.S. politics, local politics, and that includes Native politics. And man, this is an unprecedented time. I mean, we are living in the midst of a global pandemic, which, it's not even so much a global pandemic anymore. It's a hemispheric pandemic. It is mostly in the Western Hemisphere. It's the Americas. United States leading the pack. 6.25 million confirmed by test cases, which is probably 10 times that. It's probably more like 62, 63 million people that are or have been sick. There is 188,900 confirmed dead, which is probably low. It's probably over 250,000 people that have died from COVID-19 or COVID-19 exacerbating other underlying conditions. And school has barely even started yet. Yeah, in the South it started. Universities have started bringing students back. They're not kids anymore, I guess. And of course, that's all showing itself. You're seeing universities that are shutting down. I think SUNY Oswego, is it? No, is it Oswego or Oneonta? Oneonta, I think it is. SUNY Oneonta had to shut down. And living here in where we're surrounded by Western New York's numbers are not good. Seneca Nation just announced 5 new cases, as of late. Look, this ain't good, folks. And there's a whole lot of people who just seem to be oblivious to what's happening. And look, there's an election happening in the United States on November 3rd. And, it's starting to get uglier and uglier, not only with the campaign, but how they're even dealing with the conflicts in the street, people shooting each other over ideologies. I mean, over racism. I mean, this isn't just typical urban violence. And I don't even want to, or attribute it to urban violence. This is literally white supremacists against people who are either anti-fascist or Black Lives Matter or people who are just not who are protesting the status quo. And of course, like I said, you got the white supremacists, the KKKsters, the Proud Boys, what's the other one they call themselves? The Prayer. Patriot Prayer. You gotta love their names, right? Patriot Prayer. I don't know. Look, the world's gone crazy, but it isn't gone crazy over there. It's gone crazy all around us right here. And look, I know there's a whole lot of people that seem to be oblivious to it. I called this show Living in the States of Confusion because there is a lot of it. Look, there are people who are prioritizing their kids' sports careers over their health and well-being. And look, I get it. Look, high school for me was a great time. I liked competing in sports. I did a lot of things in school. And if I had to have my high school, any single year or multiple years of my high school deprived from me, I would be disappointed as a student. But, some of this is more the parents than it is anybody else. And look, next week, the vast majority of kids will, in some manner, be going back to school, whether it's a couple of days a week, whether it's all virtual. There's every school district that I'm aware of is offering some level of in-class instruction. And that means, these are super spreader scenarios. These are opportunities. And we understand. We understand that kids generally are more resistant to the adverse effects of COVID-19. And while they are still at risk, and nobody should minimize that risk, they certainly are carriers, and they can bring it back and get grandma and grandpa, and I'm a grandpa. I mean, the possibilities are nightmarish. And of course, all this stuff is happening all at once. And of course, we're in the heart of hurricane season. We just saw, two hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. There's more brewing up. The climate change. I heard that Greenland lost more ice in 2019 than in the history of tracking it. Look, there's some bad stuff. I've talked about this stuff on the show. Look, I've talked about everything. I've talked about all of these scenarios: climate, economy, government corruption and conflict, social conflict, racism, causing some of these race wars for all intents and purposes, global conflicts. I've talked about the economic, collapse, and of course, climate change. The only thing I didn't throw into the mix over the years I've been concerned about this stuff has been a global pandemic. For some reason, that never quite registered to me. And, and apparently it still hasn't registered to a whole lot of people today. Look, we are living in unprecedented times, and there is no easy way out. You're not going to pray your way out of this. You're not going to vote your way out of this, because I want to consider a few things. So what happens if Biden wins? Honestly, what the hell do people think is going to happen? Donald Trump basically has the Supreme Court on his side. He's got the Senate on his side. He's got the Justice Department in his pocket, including the U.S. Attorney General. He controls the military. He's got this executive order, privilege that he can make things happen. That, all this idea of checks and balances, bullshit. There's no checks and balances. This is a guy who can talk about, grabbing pussy and paying off porn stars, and everybody's okay. The evangelical right is okay with it. Of course, the evangelical right is, some of those leaders are, watching the pool boy tap the wife. I mean, so it's really, really a strange time. But if Biden wins, do you think Trump's going to lay down? Of course, it's going to be a contested election. And he's going to contest it. Look, he's already, trying to hamper the post office. He's got some real jerk as the postmaster general, trying to screw with the efficiency of the post office to screw up mail-in ballots. Look, and I'm going to talk about this stuff today. I realize that this is Let's Talk Native. But you know what? We are impacted by their crap. We are impacted by all of it. And we're also, we're treated adversely by both parties. So trust me, I'm going to go after Biden in a little bit too here. So don't get feeling like, oh yeah, he's in Biden's pocket. No, I am anything but that. But think about it. You've got all of these right-wing militias, militia groups. These, again, the Proud Boys, the Patriot Prayers, the KKK. You've got all of these guys who are arming themselves to the teeth. And look, if you think you're going to get ready, you're going to prepare, forget about it. You think there's no body armor left. It's all bought up. There's no semi-automatic rifles left. They're all bought up. And what do you think they're being bought up for? All of this ammunition, you'd be lucky to be able to buy a bullet at this stage of the game. So if you haven't prepared yourself for an armed conflict, which I'm not sure that's going to work out really well anyway, but if that's what you wanted to do and that's what you intend to do, guess what? You're too late. You're too late. And look, the violent nature of the right on this thing, and the fact that they are aligned with the police. Look, when I was talking about all the ones that are in Trump's corner, every police union has endorsed Donald Trump. Every major, every urban police union, every union representing police. So the police are in Trump's corner. And whether the military is in Trump's corner or not, he controls the military. He's the commander in chief. And you know what? That doesn't change on November 4th. You know, there's that they call it the lame duck session there, which used to be just between the election day and the time that the president is outgoing. Democrats are lame ducks in the entire last year or two of their presidency, it seems. You just ask Obama in his attempt to name a Supreme Court nominee. But yeah, so Trump has from November until late January to really wreak havoc on all kinds of things. And do you think he won't? Honestly, do you think there's something that this guy's going to grow a conscience? And of course, this is all if he loses. This peaceful transition of power. I listened to some Republicans on the news channel saying, well, yeah, we anticipate there will be a peaceful transfer of power. Bullshit. No, you don't. You guys are all hedging your bets on how you're going to keep him in office, how you're going to contest the election. Like I said, the majority of state governors, and it's the states that control the election process. It's not the federal government. It's not the media as much as people think it is. It's the states. And look, you saw kind of the debacle that existed when the race for governor of Georgia played out. I mean, one of the very guys who was responsible for voter suppression becomes the governor. And yeah, no surprise, he's a Republican. So, look, this is not going to go well in November 3rd. Okay, let's flip it the other way. What if Trump wins? Well, I'll tell you, if Trump wins, however it does, whether he wins electoral college only like he did the last time and loses by 2 or 3 million votes, whether he wins the popular vote and the electoral college, it doesn't matter. He is going to be so validated. Everything you think he got away with in 4 years, he's going to crank it up for the next 4. Because you know what? Here's the thing about the last 4 years. He doesn't have another 4 years, although he keeps hinting at 12 more years, not 4 more years. Some people say, well, he's saying 12 more years because he means, a Mike Pence, 8 years after him. Like that's going to happen. Look, so if Trump wins, he is going to be worse than he ever was. And so here's the other question. What are the Democrats going to do? And, because I'll tell you what the Democrats are going to do. Nothing. Because that's what Democrats do. They are pitiful and they are weak. They're capitulating. And if you don't believe me, you can just watch what Joe Biden is saying in the wake of this violence that's happening over more black men being shot by cops needlessly. In the wake of this violence, you still have Joe Biden, trying to pitch himself as a law and order president. Or candidate. He's still trying to pitch this thing. And this guy was never a friend to any aspects of justice reform, nor was his vice president nominee, Kamala Harris. She was as guilty as any prosecutor in the United States for violating suspects' rights, withholding information. See, look, there's this thing called science, right? And science is supposed to be this idea where you gather information and you see where the information takes you. That's not even the way science works anymore. But it's certainly not the way the Justice Department works. Half of these people, whether they're in law or whether they're even in research now, they have a theory. And they start gathering information to support their theory. They have a suspect. They start gathering. They ignore all the other information. They don't care if something, invalidates a suspect or invalidates their theory. As long as they can keep piling up some information. That's not science. That's not justice. When people talk about conspiracy theories, the conspiracy theories aren't the lunatic fringe. The conspiracy theories are the ones who are operating government, who are operating the justice system, who are operating much of what is being purported out to be their science. And look, I'm not trying to be anti-science. I'm pro-science. I'm just not in favor of the way, I mean, I'll give you an example. There's finally some consensus that archaeologists and anthropologists are saying, yes, we appear to have been wrong. Native people have been living in the Western Hemisphere for longer than we thought. And then they'll say 30,000 years. They're off by about 100,000 years, but that's that. So why do they have to say they were wrong? Well, because they had this theory about how we got here and that we just kind of barely beat the white man here. And they gathered whatever information they could to substantiate and to validate that theory. They called it the Bering Strait theory, the land bridge theory. Those weren't theories. They were hypotheses. A hypothesis is not a theory. A theory is something that is backed by overwhelming evidence. That's what it's supposed to be. A hypothesis is when you say, I have an idea. Let me see if I can find information to support this idea. That's the opposite of science. When you say something is hypothetical, is where you're saying, well, if this happened, if there was a land bridge 13,000 years ago because of the Ice Age or what whatever their BS theory was, people could have navigated or could have crossed. That's a hypothesis. That's not a theory. I mean, and so and that's the way the Justice Department works. And again, under Trump, it's going to continue to work that way. But you know what? Under Biden, it would have too. So again, let me back up again. Let me talk about what happens if Trump wins. If Trump wins, are the Democrats going to do anything? Are they going to be up in arms? Because the people who are in the streets right now, these so-called what they're calling Antifa, which is it's really absurd that anybody's trying to say anti-fascists are the bad guys. And that's what the right's saying. The right's saying those anti-fascists. So who are good guys? Pro-fascists? Well, apparently, because that's what the right seems to be. So these people who are against fascism and the Black Lives Matter movement and the people who are supporting either or just generally are discontent with the status quo, they aren't necessarily Democrats, folks. Those people on the streets, and I'm going to tell you right now, I couldn't give a rat's ass about somebody breaking a storefront or looting for that matter. I mean, there have been villages of Native people. There have been townships, the Tulsa riots. There have been black communities that have been leveled for far less than a murder. In some cases, just a suspicion or just because they were in the freaking way or out of outright jealousy. So when you talk to me about how wrong it is to for anybody to loot, for one thing, I'm not even sure who these looters are. I think it's a very much embellished scenario. But when you consider the time that we're living in right now, and the people who are bearing the brunt of COVID-19, I don't blame anybody for busting in a store window in the midst of all of this this chaos, this injustice. And lifting something. I don't. I'm sorry. Native land's been looted for 5 centuries, and it continues to be looted for natural resources, looted against our environmental concerns, all this stuff. So I'm sorry. Cry me a river about your concern about looting, because nobody was concerned about black people getting their Tulsa being destroyed or Rosewood or any of these other places. Nobody was concerned about black people being lynched or Native people being lynched. Nobody was concerned about it. Nobody was. Do you know how much brouhaha there was over the massacre, Sand Creek Massacre? Everybody knew that was a travesty. That was just an absolute heinous crime against humanity. Yeah, we're humans. Do you know who got? Do you know what happened as a result of that? Even all the reports that were written about the Sand Creek Massacre, not a goddamn thing. That Colonel Shivington, the guy who said nits make lice, which is a same thing Hitler said, by the way. Yeah, everybody said what a terrible human being this was. A reverend, by the way. He was a confirmed, or what do they call it, ordained minister who basically liked killing Native people. And he didn't care if they were children. By the way, in case you don't recall, Sand Creek is not the only place, but it is the one place where it was well documented about Native men having their scrotums cut off so white men could make pouches out of their nut sacks. Sand Creek was the place where women were having their breasts and their vaginas cut off so white men could keep them as trophies. Or there's even talk of a Bible having been covered with the flesh of a Native person, as a result of some of this stuff. Actually, that's a story that's repeated itself a few times throughout history. But these are the kinds of atrocities, that have taken place. So when I hear anybody talk about, the dangers or what a travesty this looting is, and so when I hear the Democrats in particular, who we're starting to lean a little bit towards expressing the need for justice reform. Now they've almost bailed completely on that. Now we can argue whether they're doing this to try to win some Trump voters, or they're not going to win any Republicans, but are they going to win some independents if they, or are they afraid they're going to lose some people? I don't know. But all I know is that this. Look, I'd love to see a landslide election where Trump loses. The only problem with the idea of Trump losing is that Biden wins. And I think he's a dolt. I just think that, look, here's the problem with Democrats winning and feeling validated about winning, is that they're not going to fix anything. Their idea is that winning stopped Trump. Well, stop Trump from doing what? When I think about the stuff that took place during the 8 years of Obama and Biden, especially from a Native standpoint, look, I'll say it again. We're in the midst of a major conflict between the Senecas and the state of New York over gaming revenue, where the state is trying to extort $1 billion out of the Seneca Nation. $500 million now and $500 million later. They already got paid off $1.5 billion. But the state, and so how does this happen? I mean, well, Trump wasn't the president when the state was screwing the Senecas out of that $1.5 billion. No, he wasn't. Obama was. I mean, it goes back to like 2000, was it 2004? Or 2002, 2002. So that's how far back you go, where the Interior Department just looked the other way while states turned revenue sharing into extortion. So that's what we're faced with, regardless of who's in office. Look, it was Obama and Biden who basically laid out the plans for the Dakota Access Pipeline in terms of approvals. I mean, and Hillary Clinton, when she was running against Trump, she called Dakota Access Pipeline. Actually, she wouldn't name it specifically. She said, well, I'm very much in favor of federal infrastructure projects. What she meant was pipelines, cutting through wherever. Didn't matter whose waterways it was. It didn't. She supported the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I don't know how many Democrats really, I mean, other than Bernie Sanders, railing against some of these. I don't know who else was opposed to it. And honestly, as I sit here, I don't know what Bernie would have done. But I'm going to tell you right now, we are all in jeopardy regardless of what happens in November. And I think that some of these folks who are rioting in the streets or protesting in the streets today, if Trump wins, it's only going to get bigger. I don't know. Did Trump go to Kenosha yet? I think he was talking about going to Kenosha. If he goes to Kenosha, oh, he's been there all day. I don't know if anybody's been protesting there. I would assume so. I would assume that there may be a curfew that's being violated. But whatever they do, I'm sorry, it's not enough. It's not enough. I mean, whatever's going to happen in November, it is going to. It doesn't go well either way. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to tell a Biden supporter not to vote for Biden. And look, I honestly, I can't stand Donald Trump. And there's a certain part of me, even as I see all of these Trump flags all over Western New York, whether it's on somebody's pickup truck. Yeah, New York, not Alabama, in New York. Or I see them hanging off the front. I mean, look, one of the major businesses right here locally, Granats, the gravel, taking all kinds of gravel, all over the place. They've got their big Trump flags flying. But you know what? There was a black comedian. I'm not sure which one did. Maybe, I can't remember who it was. Who used to say they were glad that white folks hung their Confederate flags. It might have been Chappelle. I mean, it sounds like a Chappelle thing. He says, because at least now I know where they are. I mean, he goes, I am absolutely glad to see, to see a Confederate flag. So now I know where the racists live. Well, I feel the same way with Trump flags. I want to know which business supports Trump, because you cannot support Trump and claim that you're not racist. Well, no, I take it back. You are going to claim you're not racist. The problem is, it's obvious that you are, because you support or you're complicit in racism. And the reality is, when you listen to any of these white folks talk about, well, he should have obeyed the police officer's commands. Really? So police officers are commanders now? They actually can dictate make people jump through whatever hoops they want for no reason whatsoever. Anytime I see anybody weigh in about the death of Jacob Blake or George Floyd, and they're obviously resisting. No, because it doesn't matter if you're walking away, if you're running away, if you're got your hands up walking towards them, if you're if you kneel down, you stand a good chance of being killed by cops today. And it doesn't even matter how much hysteria there is over the abuse of force, because they just keep doing it. And you can be 12 years old, you can be 17 years old, you can be, you can be 80 years old. And there's nothing protects you. You can be a man, you can be a woman. Nothing protects you. And I'll tell you, it's going to be interesting to see whichever side claims victory on November 3rd, 4th, 5th, December, whenever they decide who wins. Because here's the one thing I'll also say. If this is a contested election and it drags on for a month, that's going to be a fun month, man. Because the crazy part is it's all going to coincide with an uptick in cases from the coronavirus. It's also, going to coincide with more and more people being evicted from their homes, possibly having their utilities shut off because they've been unemployed through this COVID-19 thing. This is the perfect storm. And I'm not even talking about what's going to happen when it gets cold outside. All right, hey, we're at the bottom of the hour. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break. I'm going to take a drink, cool off. Then I'm going to get excited all over again. So when we come back, this is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. All right, thanks for coming back. Hey, let me go ahead and thank my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. I want to thank Eric White and ERW Enterprises. I want to thank the folks at Grand River Enterprises, and thank any of you and all of you who make a contribution from time to time. It all helps. We struggle here. Look, our studio is on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. When I think about the infrastructure that we don't have available to us that other places do, we don't have internet here. I basically run off of these jetpacks, these little MiFi devices. That's how I even operate here. And they aren't the most reliable either, but that's what we're plagued with here. I mean, every problem. Look, we're not even sure if we're going to continue doing live streaming because of the problems that we encounter because of internet. We will still do shows, the same number of shows. So don't get me wrong there, but it's you folks who have allowed us to at least build up a little bit of an equipment inventory so we have options anyway. So I thank all of you for supporting the show. And I think, I thank you guys for sharing the show. We put these shows out in as many ways as possible: Facebook, podcasts, YouTube videos. So And it's not to inundate one person with 4 or 5 different ways to listen to the show. It's to reach out to as many people as possible. So again, if you're not subscribed to our podcast, I encourage you to do so. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, we crossed over 900. We haven't reached 1,000 yet, but we hit the 900 mark just yesterday, I think. So by all means, subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV, and you can catch not only videos of our shows, but the short form videos that we have done and will do. Look, I know I keep promising we're going to do more and more of them, and we will. It's just crazy times, man, we're living in. Hey, I want to look. I didn't go through all the comments that I see, scrolling or coming to me across Facebook. But look, when I hear somebody say anything's better than Trump, look, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree that any other human being is probably better than Trump in the presidency. The problem is, it isn't about the presidency. It's about the nature of what's happening in the United States. It's unraveling. The system is a failed system. The electoral system's failed. You've got gerrymandering that can control congressional seats, and and ultimately it controls who controls which voting areas and that kind of stuff. You've got the Electoral College that can allow a person with 2 or 3 million fewer votes win an election still, and that's a holdover from the slave era. That's a slave era concoction to give southern states, slave states in particular, or the states with more slaves, because when they developed that system, they were all slave states. And that's why it was so easily pushed through and impossible to change. It's the Electoral College system will never change until there is a just complete breakdown, not just the failure that it is now, but a complete breakdown. And here's why: it takes 2/3 of the Senate. You're never gonna. No party is ever going to have 2/3 of the Senate, because look, if the Democrats win, and they feel like the Electoral College is swinging their way, they are going to give it up. And the Republicans, who pretty much are the beneficiaries of the Electoral College, they aren't going to give it up. And they're never going to give up so many seats that the Democrats have a 2/3 majority. So you can forget about that. It'll be interesting to find out if the Democrats can take the Senate in November. I don't even think that's going to happen, frankly. I mean, it may, and I'm not trying to be a forecaster or anything like that, but I got to tell you, if Biden wins, will he be less destructive than Trump? Yes, that's probably true, barely. But here's the problem: there will be a sense of complacency if he gets. So the change that is really needed isn't going to happen. There's a better chance of change happening with the Trump presidency because of revolt, which I'm not real optimistic for either. But look, it'll be status quo with Democrats. Do you remember when Obama was going to get rid of the Patriot Act? Yeah, he didn't. Remember when Obama was going to get rid of the prisons in Guantanamo Bay? Yeah, he didn't. You remember all the promise that black people had when Obama got elected because there was finally going to be some policies that were going to benefit black people? Yeah, that didn't happen either. So, and again, I don't want anybody to interpret my condemnation of the Democrats as being pro-Republican, or my condemnation of the Republicans to be being pro-Democrat, which leads me to another place. and we talked about this when Janine Yazzie was on the show. Especially, we talked about this when she was on my New York show. The amount of pandering that Native leadership, and I'm using that term liberally, because by Native leadership, I mean federally recognized leaders. I'm not saying that they're real leaders. I'm saying it's who the feds have crowned as the leadership. And that sometimes is not even related to what the people choose. Keep in mind that many of these so-called tribal council elections, the turnout for those elections is pitifully low. I mean, on either side, band councils, tribal councils, either side of that imaginary line. Again, what they tell us, there's only about a 4% participation rate in 6 nations, and 4%. Oh, right. So 4% of the people get to or determine who the Canadian government is going to say is the rightful leadership. Of course, they don't have much authority because they're really like these municipal arms of the Canadian government. But you know what? Look, there are consultants and lobbyists and, all these businesses, all these I don't want to say businesses, all these, again, consulting firms that offer their services to Native peoples. And I read one by a guy the Seneca Nation hired, where he literally said the Seneca Nation, its government, is built within the system of U.S. federalism. Now, if you don't know what that means, what he's saying is that it's somehow tiered in there between federal, state, either above counties or below counties, but maybe only just barely above municipalities. Literally, he was suggesting in a report he was drafting for the Seneca Nation that the Seneca Nation government, and meaning all Native governments, are just a part of the hierarchy of U.S. governing systems. Absolutely clueless to the idea that Native people are distinct or separate from the system of the federalism system of the United States or Canada, for that matter. No, absolutely clueless. And yet, one of the things that we talked about when Janine had joined us was how much the Navajo leadership was pandering both to Democrats and Republicans. I mean, look, they don't even take a firm stance. They think they're hedging their bets. And there are millions and millions, and I wish I could come up with a number, but just to give you an example, back when Obama was hosting his native summits, where tribal leaders were sending their people to Washington, D.C., just conveniently around Christmas time. That way they could get some good pictures in front of the White House Christmas tree. Yeah, I said that, and it's true. Yeah, there was some estimate that tens of millions of dollars of money, of Native money, coffers, nation coffers, from these various, some couldn't afford to send anybody because it's expensive. I mean, so tens of millions of dollars was spent just so people could go for a photo op. And you know what? Obama only gave him like 15 minutes of his time. He walks through the room, shakes some hands, smiles for the camera, and then walks out. Millions of dollars for 15 minutes of bullshit interaction with Barack Obama. Yeah, I mean, now multiply that times, 52 weeks a year, and all of the money that goes into lobbying and to campaign and PAC, all of these money grabbing mechanisms that exist in U.S. politics. Again, part of the debacle that is the greatest democracy on earth. Yeah, give me a freaking break. So that's, I mean, and you got to remember, look, there are Native territories that have successful businesses. Seneca Nation is one of them. And you know what? They're in a world of hurt right now because they have become so dependent on gaming, and gaming is not recession proof. Gaming is not depression proof. It's not pandemic proof. And yet the dependency, look, I watch over the years the tail start to wag the dog here over gaming. It was once said that Senecas wanted gaming in the worst way, and that's what they got. But it's what funds them. I mean, so they're in a situation where they can't let it go. And yet you've got some people who are saying, we need to pay that $500 million to the state so they get off our backs. It's the cost of doing business. Well, I'll tell you, when you start factoring the cost of doing business, you realize that there's no profit in doing business either, even in gaming. Yeah, remember when Trump was all pissed off at Native people because of his failed casino ventures, blamed it all on Native people? Well, yeah, there's a few other venues that are going to join that. I think I heard New York State was going to lift the ban on state licensed casinos, which is really going to be a debacle because they couldn't make money before. Now they're going to try to make money where there's all this social distancing going on in their casinos. It's going to be a nightmare. And you know what? The crazy part is these failed gaming venues of the state, they look to people like the Seneca Nation or maybe even Oneida, I don't know, and say, hey, why don't you buy us? Why don't you buy this venue? And there's some genuinely some thoughts by Native leadership in various places. Yeah, we could buy those. We're already in the business. The problem is that those things aren't going to operate under IGRA, which is problematic all by itself. No, they're going to operate as state licensed casinos. But no, as I sit here and I know what's going to unravel, regardless of who wins. I mean, because I'm unlike the Democrats and the Republicans, who say if they win, it's all going to go to hell. I say it's all going to hell anyway. I mean, and look, try to tell me how I'm wrong. And I know I see some people are saying, yeah, but nobody's worse than Trump. There is something worse than Trump. And I don't mean, another president, but the unraveling, if Trump loses, do you think all of these rednecks with their Confederate flags and their Trump flags and their Nazi flags and their thin blue line flags, their police flags, do you think they're just going to lay down with this peaceful transfer of power to the snowflakes they hate? Look, the white boy who went to Kenosha from Illinois because of his own white supremacy and racism, he shot white folks. He didn't even shoot black folks. I mean, which shows that this is not even a race war. This is an ideological war that may play out. And I don't mean it's Democrats versus Republicans. No, look, I don't even think the Proud Boys and some of these Trump followers, I don't even think they care about the Republican label. They are way past that label, an R in front of their name. They're way past. They got T in front of their name, T for Trump. And the people who are resisting, who are demanding change, it ain't the Democrats. They're all, look, they got a top California cop as the vice president and a guy who pushed the crime bill through running for president on the left. And I say left, it's only left because it's left of right. It's not left, barely left of center. That's for damn sure. So, look, I know this is Let's Talk Native. And so there are some who are going to listen to the show and watch the show and say, yeah, all you did was talk about them. Well, the problem is that we get mired in this stuff. Look, I saw NCAI, the National Congress of the American Indian, doing these overtures, trying to get Native people to be poll workers to help the white man's election work better. I see solicitations all over the place trying to get U.S. Census workers out of Native territories because you know what? White people don't want to bang on our doors. In fact, I don't think Native people want to bang on our doors and ask us to participate in the U.S. Census. We are suffering, and I've talked about, I've used this expression before, from cognitive dissonance. We know that they have been the enemy and that they are the enemy, that neither party is ever going to prioritize anything for us. We are still in their way. We are still a problem for the United States. Yet we have this, again, cognitive dissonance. And in case you don't know what it means, it's where your values and your actions just don't line up. Where you in your heart of hearts know what is right. You have a moral code, a cultural code, an ethical code, and you can ignore it. Look, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance. I mean, but some people, what cognitive dissonance represents is a tension, is a struggle that people have when their actions don't follow their true belief systems. Working a job you hate. People always say, well, that's the thing. You convince yourself that you've got to go to work, that you love going to work even though you hate your job. That's what most people use that as an example of cognitive dissonance. All the evidence for climate change is around you, and you ignore it. You're boarding up your windows for the next hurricane, but you're going to insist that that it's not climate change causing it. The ocean waters are rising. Your house is getting closer and closer underwater, but you're going to ignore it. That's cognitive dissonance. But for us, it's the cognitive dissonance of assimilation. We know. Look, I've got a two-row wampum hanging on the wall here. We know that we should not be a part of their system. We know it. We have specific teachings that tell us that. There's stories that tell us that. There's the Guyana-Lagoa that tells us that. There's the Turo Wampum that tells us that. Our grandparents told us or tell us that. And yet, we're gonna be poll workers for the U.S. national election. We're gonna step up for the next election for who becomes Prime Minister of Canada. We're gonna do this stuff. So we're going to subject ourselves. We're going to step out of our canoe. We're not going to straddle. Look, I posted a question on Facebook. I said, how many people don't participate not only in their native elections, but in native governance at all, and yet still go out and vote in the U.S. election? Nobody answered. No, I mean, a few people said, well, I do both. But I know there are native people who don't participate in anything associated and living on their own territories. I know in the cities, and I give some of those folks a pass a little bit. The government that affects their lives is the government that runs the city. But when you're living on native territory and you're willing to sign a document that says that your home is in somebody's congressional district or voter district, that's problematic. That's problematic. And, look, does your voter registration form transfer the title of your home to the United States or to the states? No, but it is your signed admission that you personally are willing to acknowledge that your house, your yard, the property that you live on is part of New York State. It doesn't take a huge leap, for somebody to use that. Things like that. Look, we were told we're not quite human. We were told that we were uncivilized, that we were primitive, that we were, we were savage, mercilessly savage. I mean, we were told all of this stuff, and then they, in all of their effort to kill the native identity of our people, not just, look, I know that's the slogan for residential schools, kill the Indian, save the man. It wasn't just residential schools. Why do you think alcohol came to our territories? Because they wanted to party with us? Yeah, not hardly. It was all an effort to destroy us. And look, they were pretty effective. And the cognitive dissonance that exists amongst Native people today, because of assimilation, because of the constant, suggestion that our lives would be better as Americans, U.S. citizens. Look, they shoved all, they committed war crimes. The idea of passing a law that declares us U.S. citizens, by international standards, that was called denationalization. That was considered a war crime. They would later not use the word denationalization. They would change that and use the word genocide in its place. I talk about it all the time, but genocide isn't just about killing us. It's making us it's creating the conditions where we cease to exist. And when look, on my group page, which is Let's Talk Native, when I've got people who have been members of that page for years, in some cases, will still post stuff about voting. Look, if you're doing that, if you vote and you're hup pup, if you've got an American flag flying in your yard, all this stuff, I don't need to know that. In fact, I don't want to know that. I would rather have some doubt in my mind about how indoctrinated many of our people are. Because if they're not willing to at least say it on my page, then at least there's hope. But if you go onto my pages, if you go onto my Twitter feed, if you go onto my social media networks and proudly talk about who you endorse, and that includes Native candidates, by the way. When I see people listen, oh, Deborah Allen, I love her. I'm sorry. Not so much. White people voted those folks in. I've said it before. I mentioned it when Janine Yazzie was on the show. Diane Humatiwa, that name ring a bell? Well, Diane Humatiwa was a Native woman who was nominated by Donald Trump, or I'm sorry, see how easy this mixes these guys up? Barack Obama, for a federal judgeship in Arizona. You know who recommended Dianne Fusilier to Barack Obama? It wasn't Democrats. It was Jeff Flake, Republican, and John McCain, Republican. And so, of course, she was approved. Obama, he figured, okay, I'm going to nominate a Native person. That way, the left will support it, and she'll be Republican leading, right leaning. So the right will. So yeah, she breezed through. She was, she was accepted. And the first case that she had to rule on involving Native issues, which was a highway that Native people were opposed to going through their ancestral lands, guess how she ruled? Any guesses? Against the Native people. And you know what? Here's the crazy part. When who was it that who died there? Scalia. When Scalia crapped out, there was automatically a crowd noise of people saying, Dianne Fusilier for the Supreme Court. That would have been another right-leaning Supreme Court justice. And of course, it didn't really matter because, Obama couldn't put anybody in anyway. Not at that point. He couldn't put, in fact, he wanted to put somebody in, and a year before his presidency ended. That's why when I talk about the lame duck session for Barack Obama, his lame duck session, basically the last 2 years of his presidency was lame duck for him. Didn't accomplish a damn thing. In fact, you look at what the Republicans were saying when he was president in the last 2 years, and how much they've flipped the switch, and now everything that Donald Trump does is fine. Man, I got to tell you, I think the United States is in a world of hurt. Now, what does that mean for us? And I don't mean just Native people. What does it mean for anybody? If we're at least not aware of it, then we can't prepare at all. And look, you're too late on the body armor. You're too late on arming yourself. You're too late on stocking up your ammo. So you better figure something out. How do you disassociate yourself with the adverse effects of, again, whether it's in Democrats and the ire of the right because they're in power, or whether it's Republicans and the ire of the left, or the anarchists, whatever you want to call them, anti-fascist. It's going to get ugly, folks. It's going to get ugly, and it again, perfect storm. COVID-19, ideological wars, race wars, corrupt government, and there's still global conflicts out there too, so hold on tight. We are living in unprecedented, fascinating. I'm not saying they're good times, but I got to tell you, I am concerned. I have 9 grandchildren. I've got a grandson who turned 17 this month, and we failed them. We failed our grandchildren, and we better figure out what the hell we're going to do to try to make it up to them while any of us have time. So we've got some work to do, folks, and we better figure out a plan. So that's really my strongest message at this point, because it does not look good in the short term. It looks worse in the near term, and I can't be optimistic about the long term. Look, there's a part of me that says if Trump gets reelected, then maybe it has to get worse. I mean, notably worse before it gets better. Maybe that's the deal. My concern about the Democrats getting elected is that it'll only get nominally worse. There's a line in the Declaration of Independence, and it talks about how mankind will tolerate the insufferable as long as they can. I think if you just turn the heat up slowly, we're not going to jump out of the pan. And that's my concern about the Democrats of the United States. And look, they're not my elected officials. They're not my politicians. They're not my leadership. But I look at Indian country, native territories, and there's a whole lot of people claiming to be native leaders who are just lining up for these guys. They're willing to hang their Trump flags. They're willing to pander to the Democrats or pander to they'll pander to both because they don't even understand the system enough to take a side. Today, there should be, honestly, we shouldn't be throwing money at the Democrats. We should be throwing threats at them. Honestly, somebody should be cornering Harris and Biden saying, what the hell are you going to do? When are you going to get the Interior Department to do their freaking jobs? When are you going to do something to stop the environmental degradation of our territories? Because you might be the next president and vice president, but we're not endorsing you. And you better make some overtures on what you're going to do. And I want them publicly, so when you don't do them, I can call you the liars that most of you have been. But nobody's banging on the door of Trump or Biden. I mean, there's a bunch that are licking their boot heels, but nobody's trying to hold them accountable. I mean, listen to that sycophantic rant from the Navajo vice president, basically praising Trump for stuff he never did, or praising him for his failures on COVID-19. I mean, that was almost mind-blowing. But I say mind-blowing, but at the end of the day, it's what's expected. That's where our cognitive dissonance, the cognitive dissonance of assimilation, has gotten us to. Look, we enlist in their armed forces to go kill other people of color. We do it all. We've been doing it since the Wounded Knee Massacre, World War I. Native people started enlisting at the highest rates then, serving the very armies, the very military that murdered, sometimes only a generation back, murdered our people. That's cognitive dissonance. And is it worse now than it was then? No, but the crazy thing is we should know better now. Look, we have been fools. We have been. We let Hollywood dictate how we would dress. I mean, look, I saw representatives of the Six Nations go to Washington, D.C. I've seen the pictures to declare war on the Axis powers, and they're wearing Plains Indian headdresses. Why do you think that was? Because that's what Hollywood says we look like. So we start dressing to suit what white man's expectations of us are. I mean, this is how much the fools we've been. But you would think that in 2020, with all of our so-called education, and look, we've got the brightest white men on the planet that are advising us, and we still don't know what the hell we're doing. I say that, and that's my condemnation of native governance. I have a lot more faith, and I know that's a tough word for me to say. I have a lot more confidence, put it that way, in the grassroots native people. Because I think our people will step up. But just as we watch the systems fail for the United States, the systems in tribal councils and native governance that are modeled after the United States and their patriarchy, their male dominance cultures, I think they fail too. And so when we see somebody going to block a pipeline or a housing development, or step up because of one of our people being murdered, or many of our people being murdered, our women and children being murdered and disappeared. Those aren't tribal councils doing that stuff. When we fight the state on taxes, or even on this, some of what we're dealing with on this battle over gaming revenue, I know what the so-called tribal councils are going to do. The question is, what are the people going to do? Are you going to stop them? I don't know. Look, we are living in the states of confusion. That's my show for today. I want to thank you guys for listening. We'll be back here on Saturday. And, of course, we'll do our show, our New York show on WBAI on Thursday. See you then. Yahweh.